Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to start today's program by extending our sympathies to the families that have suffered so much on this horrendous attack upon America by the terrorists and condemn such awful attacks. We're taping this program in September, 3 days after those attacks upon New York and Washington, D.C. And again, our thoughts are with the families in this terrible tragedy. Today we are commencing the 30th year of the North Idaho College Public Forum. It seems rather impossible that we've had the opportunity and privilege to be in your homes over the past 29 years and now starting the 30th year. We gave great thought to who should be on the program as we start a new year and a very important mark in our time for this program. And I'm now pleased to welcome to the program two guests that meet what we wanted to do to start the 30th year. I welcome Dick and Janice Mullen to our program. They are in the recent past from California. We're happy to say they're now residents of Idaho, and they have a great story to tell us both today and again next week. One of our guests, Dick Mullen, has survived a terrible attack by cancer and went on to do remarkable things, and his wife, who was so totally supportive, has joined him in that. And the two things have happened after he survived this remarkable struggle with cancer is to engage in World Marathon events, or marathon runners in the United States and Greece and China and many places, both of them. And so that will be today's program. And we shall invite them again next week to talk about mountain climbing, which they have done some major mountains around the world. To both of you, welcome to the program. Congratulations to you on what you've done. And I know you'll have some encouraging statements to our audience about at what age you did this. But anyway, let's get started. And again, thanks to both of you for being here.
Well, it's nice to be here. I'm
Absolutely.
really pleased to be with both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, we've certainly seen that you have had a lot of coverage in newspapers and magazines around the world. I've seen those, and we are going to be showing some photographs too to the viewers. I also welcome Janelle Burke back to the 30th year. She is a regular panelist on the program, and Janelle, you and I will pick up and go on without Steve Shink, who went to Arizona to work, and we wish him well. But welcome back for the 30th year.
Thank you, Tony. It's wonderful to be here.
And as always, I will ask Janelle to commence the questioning of our guests.
Well, and it's wonderful, too, to have the two of you to be our first guests for this year's programs. Dick, can you tell us a little bit about what precipitated this entry into marathon running? I understand that you were teachers, and but that you were already involved in sports, and that you were teachers, and then a rather catastrophic thing happened in your lives, and you decided to do some of these activities.
Actually, I've been an athlete all my life. I mainly playing football in high school, college, professionally, and I coached and taught in junior college, high school. Football was the main sport I coached, taught history, science. And I would say that our story really begins in 1978 when I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, an advanced stage of it. I was given 6 months to a year to live. And that, hearing that was devastating enough. But to make it worse, my wife, her husband had died of the same cancer that I had. And we didn't find out about that. I guess it was just about a month after we were married. So it was really a shocking experience for both of us. So of course, I went through all the emotions that people, that go through when you're told that you have this devastating disease. I went through all the treatment, radiation, had 5 operations in 1 month. It was just a living hell, to put it bluntly. So after I was cured, my wife and I took a trip to Europe to Florence to celebrate being cured and healthy again. And we were in, what's the name of that?
Florence, the Michelangelo Museum, showing all of his works. And
They have a separate museum just for his works. And at the end of this structure, there's a statue that is the most beautiful thing you'll ever see in your life. It's Michelangelo's David. And this thing, I don't know, what is it? How high is that?
I think it's 12 feet high.
12, 13 feet. I don't know whether you've ever had the opportunity to see this or whether you have either, but it almost looks like it could step right off the pedestal and walk away. And I looked at this thing and I thought, you know, I want to do something physical. Subconsciously, I was probably really wondering if the cancer was going to come back. I was thinking, what would be the most physical thing I could do when I got back home? And I certainly wasn't going to play football anymore because I was 50 years old. So on a train to Rome, I mentioned to Jan, I said, you know, I want to run a marathon when we get back home. And she said, you know, come on, Dick, are you kidding? You almost died a year ago from cancer. How are you going to do something like that? And I said, I'm going to do it. So we just forgot about it. We got back home and I started looking into running, you know.
You started training.
Yeah. Well, not right off the bat because I wanted to find out, you know, what was required and so forth. And the goal I had set for myself was to run the Super Bowl of marathons, the Boston Marathon. So then I found out that you have to qualify within a certain time in your age category to get in that race. I picked Las Vegas because it was a flat course out around the desert and back, and I knew that if I was going to get a good time, it could be there, and that's how I got into it.
But Janice, you weren't left behind.
No, I had been an athlete too, you know, playing tennis and swimming and running a little bit. But when he started running, I thought, well, I'm going to try too. And so I started running unbeknownst to him, and he was training to run the Boston Marathon. And so I trained to run the Bay to Breakers in San Francisco, which is only a 7-mile run. But that
Only
was
7.
Yeah, well, that was good for me anyhow. So when he came back from Las Vegas, or was it Boston? I said, well, I'm going to run a race too. And so we went up to San Francisco, and I ran the Bay to Breakers.
But tell us about a marathon. What really is a marathon?
Well, a marathon is a 26 miles and a few yards.
385 yards.
Okay. And it
Burned into my head, I know
started when the Greeks were at war with the Persians in 500 BC, 520 BC, and the Greeks won, and so they wanted to know, to tell the king in Athens that they had won. And so from the village of Marathon, they sent a soldier who was named Phidippides, and he ran the 26 miles and a few yards to the king and told them that they had won the battle, and then he dropped dead. Unfortunately. Thank goodness we didn't. I shouldn't be laughing. But anyhow, that's why a marathon is that length for a race. Mm-hmm. And so that's, and tell them your speed. That isn't what I mean.
Well,
your
right.
time. Your time.
So what was quite notable as far as the Las Vegas Marathon was concerned, and one of the reasons why the press picked up on this, that was the first marathon I had ever run in my life. I didn't even know what I was doing, to tell you the truth. I just got up there and I picked out a runner that looked like he was pretty capable, and I felt if I could just keep him in my view, I was going to be running a pretty fast time. And I had to run a 3-hour and 10-minute time to qualify for Boston, so there was a lot of pressure on me, and of course I didn't know anything about pacing myself or water breaks or any of that, so I just kept this guy in view, and to make a long story short, I ran a 2:59.18, and I came in second in my age category, almost won the thing in my age category, and then the Las Vegas newspapers and so forth picked up on it and said, you know, former cancer patient, first marathon, you know, is supposed to be died a year ago. Here he's doing this and qualifies to go to the Boston Marathon, and that was it. So that was very exciting for me.
A point I want to get across, and then I'm going to ask our staff in a moment to put up slides, because viewers are helped so much by visuals to see where you've been and what you did. And thank you for sharing those with us so we could do that to our staff. But you were not 20 years old, both of you, when you started running. And then I want to tell the viewers, next week we're going to be having you as guests again, and we're going to talk about mountain climbing. You've climbed some of the high mountains in the world, and you've done both the marathons and the mountain climbing following your victory over cancer and also at another age. So would you share that story briefly, because we love to encourage our viewers. It reminded me of some others that said, you know, life really begins at 50. Colonel Sanders, I believe he was in his 60s when he started Kentucky Fried Chicken series. So, and people live longer than they used to, and we go through more careers. So, without a long dissertation on my part, tell us about that and how you've helped people.
We didn't marry until we were like 48 and 49 at those ages, and so then he became ill, and so afterwards we were well into our 50s before we were running these marathons, and so and then of course our mountain climbing we were in our 60s. So
I think the underlying thing initially when I got started with this was that gnawing feeling or wondering if the cancer was going to come back. And I knew, being an athlete, that if I could do a lot of physical things, that my body was pretty strong and pretty healthy. And so that was the beginning. But once we got into this and started running races, and I can't tell you how exciting it was running in the Boston Marathon. I mean, my God, it was like New Year's, Christmas, fireworks going off, thousands of people on either sides of the street, that whole 26 miles. And in that race, I ran a 2:50, 1:50, and almost won my age category back there, and ran it about 10 minutes faster than I had run in Las Vegas. So by this time, the press really picked up on our story, and then there was going to be a movie made about us with Kim Novak, and it really took off from there. So after that, we decided that it would be, because by this time we were really in good shape, because we had been training, running 10 miles a day, watching our diets, etc. So we thought it would be great to go to Greece and run the original marathon from the little town of Marathon to Athens, as Jan was just describing to you. That's the original route.
That I'm going to interrupt to say you're getting into these marathons, so I think we should give our slides and do that, because I think that would be interesting.
Sure.
So I want to ask the staff to put up the first one, and this is going to be, I guess, called the Las Vegas Marathon, and share that with us. What happened there?
This is coming in to the finish line at the end of the race, and you can see I'm quite a bit ahead of a lot of people, and I was competing with kids in their 20s and 30s and so forth, and as I mentioned before, I came in second in my age category.
But you were, in this race here, you were even running ahead of those that were like 20 and 30.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Because I just got myself in incredible shape and just ran, and that's it. And I was motivated by a lot of things. A lot of things were going through my mind as I was running. Am I healthy again, etc. And this is Boston.
This is Boston coming up now.
Right.
So the second one we were showing is the Boston Marathon. There it is.
Right. I'm coming across the finish line.
That's the finish line right there,
yes.
isn't it?
Yeah, it is the finish line. And I was looking at my watch, checking my time as I was crossing the finish line.
How many people approximately ran in that marathon when you were in it?
Okay, in 1981, I think approximately 16,000 people were in that race. At that time, it was strictly amateur. Today they give people Mercedes-Benz and money and all kinds of things, but it was strictly just a race for the sport of it. And
it's just grown both in size and financially too over time.
Right, but what was great about this race too is they have a record book. I think you might have looked at it, the Boston Marathon record book. And out of all those thousands of people, they only chose to feature 4 people. The winner of the race, who was a guy named Masako from Japan, Allison Rowe from Australia, and myself, and another fellow by the name of Kelly that's been running the Boston Marathon for 80 times or something. He was an older man. But I felt really very special about that.
The next one we're going to is a Greece Marathon, and we have 2 slides, and the first one will come up now, and you can share with us, because you were getting ready to do that a minute ago. There we go, about that particular marathon.
This is well into the race. We just ran this marathon on our own, so this is going across the Plains Marathon, I guess.
The
is
Plains
Jan?
Marathon, right. And may I add, he left me because I was so slow, and he went on ahead, and he got to Athens, 2 hours before I did, and he left me behind.
So you're running this race too?
Yes.
This was quite exciting too, because the Athens News, which is their newspaper there, they were following us along in a car, and they did a big story about us in that paper too. The next day when we left the hotel, it was so exciting to wake up in Greece and open up a newspaper and see your picture and a story about
Well, you shared your newspapers with me, and there's also magazines. It's 2 or 3 page layouts about your story and what you're doing. We'll get the next slide now, which is also in Greece.
This is Jan.
And is this Jan running in this?
Yes.
one? Okay, Jan.
Yes. Well, as I say, Dick left me behind, and in Greece in those days, the women, have little black bandanas and shawls, and to see this older woman all by herself running along the highway, they'd take a double take. And Dick had hired a cab driver to keep checking on me. He would drive back and forth and check on me, and I finally came in a couple hours after Dick, and when you go through Athens, you run through Athens, the traffic in Athens is just unbelievably terrible. Everybody is driving their cars here and there and so forth. So I was so embarrassed, just this haggard look on my face, because I had been running like 3.5 or 4 hours up to that point, because it took me like 5 hours, can you imagine, to finally get to this huge stadium in Athens. And it was the stadium that they built for the modern day Olympics. And so that's where we ended. Yes.
That had to be impressive.
And Dick was sitting there drinking beer, and I was so mad at him because he had been just resting all this time.
For quite a while, right?
Yes, he was. But I finally made it, and I was so proud of myself, because that actually was the first marathon that I had ever run.
And we're going to go to 2 more slides. The first
Sure.
one, again, is that your race in China. This is the Great Wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you're the first couple to
Only.
run the wall
Only
in a marathon.
We're the first and only people that ever ran a marathon on top of the Great Wall of China. That picture right there was taken from a Chinese helicopter that was flying over the top of us. And I'm sure they were out there, worried that we might fall off the wall or whatever. You can see how it's all crumbled and falling apart here. The initial stages of it, they've restored it for about maybe 50 yards. But then after that, it just falls apart.
It's been there a long time.
Yes,
Right,
and there are
exactly.
trees. When you go way out, there are trees growing up in the center of it, and
I don't think a lot of people are aware of the fact that the Great Wall of China was not built at one time.
Mm-hmm.
It was built in segments by warlords, and finally the Emperor of China connected it. So it was like in a time warp. It was so fascinating that you knew you were running on top of a structure that was over 3,000 years old, and the masonry would change. You'd look down on some of it was brick, and then some of it was something else. And in those days, just like today, they had good masons and bad masons, and that's probably where a lot of it was falling apart.
We have another photograph here, and that is of the area that's near
They
the end.
repaired that
They
area,
repaired
right.
that.
Yeah, this was at the beginning when we started the race, and we had newspaper people from all over the world, Reuters and the Associated Press, so forth. They were taking all these
Now, I think
pictures.
we can reveal to the viewers too that you didn't go to the government of China and ask permission to do this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You got into the country legally, of course.
Sure. This is sort of an interesting story, and of course we laugh about it now, but it was fairly serious at the time. We just didn't want to take the chance of telling them or asking them or anything about doing this. But we had a lot of press coverage before we got to China. We went through Bangkok and then Japan and into China, and we were running all this time, and they were putting stories about us in the newspapers there in Japan, Bangkok Post, all that stuff. So when we got to China, they knew what we were going to do. And the night before we ran, 2 people from the government came up to our room. Jan was downstairs having a cup of coffee, thank goodness. And these people walked in, and they had an interpreter, of course. And this woman related to me that this was an ill-conceived idea, that we shouldn't do it. In China, people, don't do these kinds of things, blah, blah. The soldiers were going to stop us. Anyway, to make a long story short, I just listened, and I certainly agreed with them, and they left. So
If I had known that, I wouldn't have run the
so,
following
but I
day.
knew that I knew the next
he
day
didn't tell me.
that we were going to have people from the press. In fact, there was a guy from the U.S. Embassy there driving us out to the wall, and I thought, you know, they're not going to do something that's going to create a real problem out here. And we got up on the wall, and I shook hands with a couple of Chinese soldiers. They looked at us, you know, rather strange. They didn't know what we were doing, and we just took off and ran, and that was it. As we got out further, I'd say maybe 10 miles out, there was a Chinese military camp off to the side, and they blew whistles at us and sort of yelled, and so, you know, because it was strange for them to see two people running on the Great Wall way out where they were.
Dick just said, just keep running, and so we did.
Yeah. Did you run, come back the way you had gone?
Exactly. We went out about 14 miles, wanted to make sure that we were going to run more than 20. Actually, we did run more than 26 miles and went back.
I just wanted the viewers to know that you didn't run the entire wall.
I don't think so. All 3,000 miles. No.
You might still be there. Yeah. Okay, with that, we'll go back to Janelle.
Well, it's very interesting that you've done these things, but you do a lot of training. Now, not every one of us can run that whole 26 miles, but we can do some walking and some running. And so what do you suggest for people who are our age, who want to do some exercise and do some things that are good for their bodies?
The thing I always mention to people, and as I mentioned to you before, I will mention it now, I have a website where I get email from people all over the world, cancer patients and so forth, asking me these same questions. And I always tell them, look, you don't have to run the Boston Marathon or climb Mount Everest or anything else. Set goals for yourself that are realistic, whether it's walking around the block twice a day. Anything that's physical, get into it. Join a health club, aerobic classes, swim, play tennis. Just keep your body moving. And you don't have to do, say the things that we've done to prove yourself to anybody or anything. And it's just important to be realistic, know what your body is capable of doing, and then do it. It has to become a lifestyle, really, I think. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I would agree, and I think also, too, try to keep your weight down, which is very difficult as you grow older. And so Dick and I really try to keep our weight as low as we can, because that gives you more energy to do these exercises that we do. And I go to a gym every day, and Dick teaches me how to work out with weights, and I still run a little, not as much as I did before, but still run, and if I don't run, I walk.
And eat healthy.
And eat healthy, yes, absolutely. That's so important.
So those two things are really important, because you can exercise, till you're blue in the face, but if you don't have a proper diet, you're not going to lose weight, and you're not going to be very healthy. Food and what you eat is so important, and exercise, of course, also.
And I think this helped in his fight with cancer, too, eating properly and taking vitamins, and I think that really helped a lot, too. And
well, I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but I have had like 4 or 5 other cancers since the Hodgkin's 20 years ago. I had bladder cancer, I had melanoma. I'm talking about over a 20-year period. I had tumors around my eye sockets, and I just followed the same game plan, and had a real good mental attitude. I watched my diet, I exercised, I just refused to give into it. And all these things just took care of themselves. For some reason, I think I might be susceptible to all kinds of cancers. Obviously, that's what's happened, whether it's genetic or whatever, but I've just been sort of cursed with that, but it's sort of been a double-edged sword, because I've been able to deal with it and win over it, so it's worked out pretty good both ways.
He just went through a bout with bladder cancer, and just this last week he had a examination, and he's free of that too. So yes. And
there's a couple of things that maybe affect you. You certainly have recommended for others, and you did. You had physicians, and you had treatment, and all of that too. But in talking with you and getting to know you, I know that you were really a very good athlete. You played football for UCLA, and then you played for what is now the San Diego Chargers. I guess they were the Los Angeles Chargers.
A long time ago.
Tell us a little bit about how that's helped you, both in already having conditioned your body from a young age, but also the discipline in that process.
Well, again, as you can imagine, being an athlete, you lead a very disciplined life. And that's the way I approached cancer when I first got it. I approached it, it was an opponent, and I was going to defeat it, and that's all there was to it. I mean, there was no other way. And the same way that I've always looked at athletics. And I set up a game plan, and which, again, I always tell people the same thing: a strong mental attitude, diet, and exercise. That's what I did, those three things, those three basic things, and I worked with the doctors and did exactly what they told me to do. Because a lot of people will go off on these tangents. They'll either go in one direction or the other. And you need everything going for you. You need the doctors, you need medical science, you need all the latest things that they have to offer, but then you've got to take on responsibility for yourself. And you've got to watch what you eat. And radiation and chemotherapy, all these things that I've been through, it not only kills cancer cells, it destroys everything in your body. That's why you lose your hair, taste buds. Your body needs strong nutrition and to maintain a strong immune system. So these are pretty basic things, really, if you stop and think about it. And they worked for me. And as I said, being a former athlete, I just set up a game plan and I just lived by it. And I didn't change my lifestyle one bit. I almost tricked my body into thinking that I wasn't sick anymore. I used to get up, like when I had Hodgkin's and going through radiation, which was just terrible. I had 6 weeks of my lower body and 6 weeks, 12 weeks of straight radiation, really heavy doses of it. And I lost my hair, lost my taste buds, burned holes in my skin where they were radiating my body. It was just incredible. But I used to get up every single day and I'd go to the gym and work out. If I could only lift 2 pounds, I'd be there. If I looked horrible with no hair, I'd put a towel over my head and I'd walk in there and do it. And it paid off, because I remember I used to run at night because I was so embarrassed because I looked so terrible, so no one would see me. And I could run maybe 10, 15 feet and I'd fall down and cry and go through all the emotions that people who've had this dreaded disease know what I'm talking about. And I'd get up and fall down and get up and fall down. And finally, I'd go home and go to sleep. I kept doing that and doing it. And one night I went up there and I was able to run like 20 yards instead of 10 feet. And it was like someone had turned a faucet on. I just knew something had happened. And the next night I was able to run a little bit further. Sooner or later I was running a lap. My taste buds came back. Everything started falling into place.
You did something so intelligent. It's very hard when you're sick and you're taking all that treatment, having the appetite. But if you don't have the proper food and nutrition, you can't make that counter battle for your system. Janice, before time's up, we don't have much longer. You're also to be so commended. You were a great support system, and I know that from our conversations that when he would struggle so much and he'd come home and eat and he'd lose what he ate, and again, you too had to be a great partner, but also sometimes I'd eat 2 or 3 times before he could keep his food.
Yes, well, as I think we mentioned before, my former husband died of cancer, and he had cancer for 6 years. And I treated him differently than I treated Dick. I was, always so careful with him, and always, helping him and so forth. And I thought, well, when Dick came down, that I was going to treat him differently and just treat him like nothing was wrong with him. And
I guess I got the note that we're out of time, and so I'm going to have to
cancel that whole bit.
We'll,
That's okay.
We'll come back next week and do that. Ladies and gentlemen,
Sure.
We'll have the same guest again next week, and we'll continue to talk about this very marvelous story. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced by North Idaho College located on Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guests.
I'm most pleased to welcome our guests back from last week. We have with us Dick and Janice Mullen. Our two guests have a very, very great story to tell. And for our viewers who were not here last week, let me simply give that background again. Dick Mullen discovered that he had cancer a number of years ago, and it was a type of cancer that was supposed to be fatal. And the wonderful story is that he was able to have victory over cancer with the help of his physicians and his exercise and his diet. And following that, he and his wife went to Europe, Janice, who's here with us today, to celebrate. And out of that came a remarkable story, which had already started with his victory over cancer. And they started running marathons around the world. And in addition to that, they also decided to climb mountains. On the program last week, we talked about some of their marathons in China and in Greece and in the Boston Marathon. And on the program today, as we welcome you back, we want to talk about your mountain climbing and continue this story of great victory. I think of Lance Armstrong when I hear your story. Welcome back. Thank you for taking 2 weeks to be with us. Appreciate it. And as always, we're pleased to have our regular panelist, Janelle Burke. And I have a tradition of inviting Janelle to commence the question, which we will continue today.
Thank you. It's going to be interesting to hear now about your adventures climbing mountains. You started out with running, with doing marathons, and
Correct.
By that time you were in pretty good shape. But then you decided somewhere along the line that you'd like to climb some mountains. How did that happen?
This is an interesting story. We actually got into mountain climbing purely by accident. And I would say by my big mouth, wouldn't you agree?
I would say so.
We had just finished running our marathon on top of the Great Wall of China, and we were being interviewed by some of the various newspapers. And some of the reporters were saying, well, gee, what are you going to do now? You've beat cancer, you've done all these things all over the world and everything. What's next? And I was tired. I wasn't really paying any attention to what I was saying. I said, well, I guess I'll go climb Mount Everest. And that was it. I forgot that I had even said that. And, we were so excited being in China and finishing what we had just done and so forth. So I never even thought about it anymore. So we get back to the United States, and there's all kinds of reports that former cancer patient, and now he's going to try to climb Mount Everest. In some of these newspapers that friends of ours were sending us all over the place, that they had, the Boston Globe, various newspapers. So I said to Jan, gee, I didn't mean that. I've never been on the top of the roof of my house before, let alone climbing a mountain. I said, I guess they'll just forget about it. People forget these things. To make a long story short, we got a phone call from a fellow that had an expedition company in Boston, and he said he had read about our story in the Boston Globe, and he said, I understand you're interested in climbing Mount Everest. And I said, no. I said, that was just off the top of my head. I said, we're not mountain climbers. And he said, I have an interesting project for you. He said, I'd like to come out to Carmel and talk to you about it. And I said, well, if you'd like to, but I said, we're not mountain climbers. I want to make that very clear. He said, I understand that. So he came out, we stayed at our home, we had dinner, and he said, I have an interesting project for you. He said, not many people have ever climbed the 7 highest peaks on the 7 continents. And he said, no one your age has ever come near doing anything like that. And he said, how would you like to try something like that? And he said, we'll try Kilimanjaro in Africa, which is the first mountain. It's very high, but it's not a technical mountain. You can find out whether you can handle altitude, etc. And we'll go from there, each one. And that's how it got started. And we went to Africa, we climbed Kilimanjaro. Jan was the first person up the mountain.
To reach the summit, yeah. I was.
And we were with young people, also young males in their 20s and 30s, and the Africans were calling you...
They call older women in Africa mama, and so I was given the name Strong Mama. And I loved it. I just thought it was great.
So that's how it got started.
I'm just so glad to hear that, because on our program last week, Janice, you were talking about in the marathons that Dick would run off and leave you, like in Greece, and
he would.
Hours later you would catch up and he'd be sitting, resting and drinking a beer. I suppose you're on the mountain drinking beer, waiting for him to come up.
That's right.
That was just about it.
Back.
So there's a beautiful story there about how in different events or sports, as Dick would appreciate as an athlete who played football, the talents change depending on what you're doing.
Yes.
And women usually make very good mountain climbers because they're small. They can get in and out of areas that larger, men
And they're more
have
agile
right.
sometimes than men are, some men.
Plus
And
they're
anyhow,
not carrying all that weight up the mountain either.
true, yes. Yeah.
I think what I'm going to do, because I know our viewers just love to see some visuals of, it's almost like taking them with you on the trip without all the exhausting experience. I'm going to ask our staff to put up again. We're going to go through, I guess, a total of about 7 slides here. Here's the first one. You're in Russia here, I believe, and would you share with us where you are there?
This is Mount Elbrus. We were right at probably just below the base camp there, I think, when this picture was taken. Elbrus is the highest mountain in Europe. It's close to 19,000 feet. That's a very difficult mountain to climb because it's snow right from the bottom clear up to the top.
Now, did you go completely to the
Yes, I did. And in fact, I was up there with a Russian climber called Sergei. We had a whiteout at the top of the mountain, and he left me up there, which was a very frightening experience because he was assuming that I was a better climber than I was. And I had to come down off that mountain. I almost missed the base camp. There were crevasses all over the place. And remember, they had to send out a group of people to find me actually in the snow. So that was a very dangerous, scary experience. In fact, that was probably one of the most frightening experiences I've had in mountain climbing.
So in the future, to communicate better with those with you, that don't leave me behind. The story.
Exactly.
The next one we're going to show is Mount McKinley, which is, of course, in North America. And there you are again.
Yes, this was up getting close to the top. And we climbed this mountain with a fellow by the name of Scott Darsney, who was one of the few people that's ever climbed Mount Everest without oxygen, an incredible climber. And he took us up close to the summit. The weather got bad, the wind came up, it started to snow, and he said it was too dangerous to go any further, but we were close to the summit on that one.
This one, I was more frightened than any other mountain that I've ever climbed because the weather was so terrible. It was just awful, and I really became frightened, because it just scares you when you're in a tent, and even though it's night, it's light out because, we were there in the summer, and the wind hitting the tent, I was really frightened, but we made it to what, about?
Well, that mountain is close to 20,000. We were about 18,000 feet when Scott said this is too dangerous to keep going up here any further. And that's one thing I should mention, that people that climb these mountains, if you're not with the right expedition and with people that really are familiar with these places, you can get killed very quickly. And a lot of people do on McKinley too, because they go there with not proper equipment, people that don't know what they're doing. They're just not capable of doing things like this, and it can be very dangerous. So
McKinley is known as the Everest of the West because it's such a severe.
Even though it's not as tall, it's just the severe weather.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And by having a professional guide, he knew that you weren't going to make it to the top. You needed to turn around.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The next one is Mount Everest.
Yeah.
What a breathtaking experience. We'll start by telling the viewers that you didn't go to the top of Mount Everest,
No.
but how tall is Mount Everest?
Mount Everest is 29,000, close to 30,000 feet.
And you went how far up?
We went way beyond the base camp into the Kumba Ice Glacier, which is a very dangerous place. Huge blocks of ice are constantly shifting around, and this is where most of the people get killed, actually.
And what high is that?
That's about 18,000 feet.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And we went a little bit beyond there. We, as I mentioned to you before, the Nepalese Rangers and our Sherpas told us that we got up higher on Mount Everest than any couple our age had ever got on Mount Everest, so that was quite a thrill for us.
At 60, in our 60s anyhow.
We
for
were
sure.
like
There we are.
64 or something.
Yeah. There's our Sherpa.
Yeah, so both in your marathons and in your mountain climbing, you have really, based on your age category now, you have really stood out as doing some first, and in some cases still the only ones to do it at that age.
Yes.
Well, we're the only ones that ever ran.
Now here's the second Mount Everest photograph.
Right.
That's our Sherpa Amport there.
They used to bring tea and cookies in the morning. That's all we had to eat up there. We talk about a diet. If you want to lose some weight.
We lost lots of weight.
I came back looking like I had been in a prison camp for 20 years. But these Sherpas were just incredible people and so strong and so concerned about your safety and just awesome people.
The next one we're going to show is from Africa, I believe, is our next one here. And you can
That's
This
the
is
summit.
this is the top of Kilimanjaro. It was 5 below zero when we got up there.
and it's about how high?
Kilimanjaro is 19,300 and something.
So most of your mountain climbs up to 20,000 somewhere. in there.
Well, Aconcagua was 22,000.
Okay, that'll be next, yeah, in a minute. But
But this was the top of Kilimanjaro. And Kilimanjaro is a beautiful mountain to climb.
There's that.
now here's the other one.
This is Aconcagua. That's going through a glacier on the way up to the summit.
What a breathtaking
And
photograph.
that's another, these places are so dangerous because those huge blocks of ice tip over or melt. And if you're anywhere near any of that, you're going to be seriously injured. But Aconcagua is a very dangerous mountain. It's 22,000 feet. It's in Argentina. And it's the highest mountain in South America. And a lot of people get killed on this mountain also. So I was with a real good expedition. 4 of us made it to the top of that mountain, and that was a very exciting
And
experience.
then Chance, did you go on this one?
I did not go on this one. I had a herniated disc and I was in the hospital.
Okay.
From I'm a fairly small woman, and to carry backpacks from the mountain that we had climbed before was in Elbrus. I really ruined my back, and so I had a back operation, and so I didn't go on this
And I
one.
believe we have one more photograph
Sure.
of this particular climb on this mountain. I think that
That's
here we go.
Aconcagua, right?
Right. So, based upon this experience on all these mountains, how long would you be up on the mountain usually, from the base all the way up?
It would vary. Like Kilimanjaro, it took us probably 6 days to get to the top, something like that.
And then
You have to acclimate.
and then to come down. So you're
Right.
from up to down. You're what?
Well, it's
12 days?
Yeah, you just follow the same route back down again.
When you get to 12,000, you have to stay 2 days to acclimate, and then again at 17,000,
Every 3,000 or 4,000 feet,
you have to
stay
stay
there.
like 2 or 3 days to acclimate your body to the
So you
height.
were there close to 2 weeks. Aren't you?
Oh, we were in Africa longer than that.
I mean, but on the mountain
yeah,
itself.
oh, for
Sure.
sure. And then Everest, geez, it seemed like we were there a month. I mean, that was a real long time. Aconcagua, that was like 14, 15 days. Again, so much of this is determined by the weather. Like, if you have to wait for a storm to blow
Right.
over or whatever, you can be at base camp for a week waiting for this type thing to straighten itself out. So each mountain has its own personality, and sometimes you can go up fast, sometimes you can't. And that's why it's so important to be with people that know what they're doing, an expedition that really understands the mountain.
So when you're going with a company like this that are experienced, every person I assume on the climb has a certain responsibility, a certain amount to carry, and
Well, the thing is, we were very fortunate. We met this guy by the name of Harry Johnson, who was the head of Genet Expeditions in Alaska, and he set up all the climbs for us. And what they do is they ship all the equipment, tents, ice axes, crampons, everything to a certain spot. Like when we climbed in Russia, they sent it to Moscow. And then you have climbers, at that particular time we had like 10 guys from Japan, Australia, the United States, all over the world. They have a time frame that they have to be in Moscow. And if they don't get there, well, the expedition takes off, and then you leave from there with all the equipment and so forth, and you start to climb the mountain. Because as you can understand, you're not going to carry all this stuff on a airliner. I mean, that's for sure.
Quite often, I'm the only woman
Well,
on
you
these
were.
expeditions, and they don't care. You have to carry just as much
you
as.
have a pack. And
Oh, absolutely. And
how much does it? Normal weight?
40 pounds
Oh, sure,
sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And
you-
as I was saying before, I'm a fairly small woman, and this was tough sometimes. But they don't care. Mountain climbers are very self-centered. They, want to reach the summit, and they don't care if you're there with them. You do your part.
If you decide to go, you're going to be the.
That's right.
Well,
It's a true form of equality.
The thing is, you have a lot of responsibility, and some of these
Right.
situations are very dangerous. And if you're not with competent people that know what they're doing, that's why it was important that we got involved with this expedition company out of Alaska, because they made sure that we were with climbers that had climbed a lot of these mountains. All of the mountains that you climb on, there's usually a climber or two from that country, so there's no language problem. They can translate, and they're familiar with the mountain and know
Right.
exactly when you should climb, when you shouldn't climb, etc. So we felt very fortunate that we met this guy in Russia, and he sort of took us under his wing and really got us in with some groups of really great climbers and really neat people. And
I have two more questions, and then we'll go back to Janelle. And one of them is that even we've read stories about some really professional climbers climb for years, and they will die on mountains because there is such a shift in the weather. And if you're going to be gone that long up a mountain, you don't have any way of knowing for sure. Although sometimes a year I know it's better for climbing those, but that's how some people lose their life, isn't it? It's just such a severe change in the weather.
it can happen just like that. When I was on Elbrus, as I said before, we were at the top of the mountain. The sun was out. It was a beautiful day. All of a sudden, it was just nothing but a white. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And this fellow, Sergei, went on ahead of me, assuming that I was right, behind him, and I wasn't. And that was a very dangerous situation. And that can happen just like that. Weather changes so quickly. The wind comes up. It snows. You can't believe the changes in
and then, of course, the altitude is so high, you're so high that a lot of people are suffering from altitude sickness. Right. And I tend to, especially in Mount Elbrus, I never did make the summit because I became so ill. You get headaches and you throw up, and
well, you can get cerebral edema or pulmonary edema, and you can die. We've been on mountains with kids that that have run triathlons in Hawaii, in their 20s, great athletes. They get up to about 13,000 feet. They get sick, and the only way you can get out of that situation, you have to get right down off the mountain, and otherwise you could die up there. So a lot of that is a genetic thing too, how your body responds to that height.
The other question before going back to Janelle has to do with being on that long food and what type of food that you have.
It's all dried food. They melt snow and tea and packaged cookies, any candy bars, anything that give you just energy. You're really half of the time when we were on Mount Everest, I'm sure those Sherpas were cooking us snake or I don't know.
It wasn't too good.
No,
but you just don't ask.
No.
Right, you just eat anything.
Ignorance is bliss.
Right.
And you're hungry.
Yes,
Exactly.
you are.
Janelle Burke.
Well, I have a whole series of little questions just about like Tony's questions because this is so fascinating. The first one is with regard to trails. How do they determine where they're going to go? It would seem to me like it's pretty difficult to know.
There are no trails. There are certain routes that they call, but I mean it's not like in a park where there's a dirt path going up the mountain. You follow a certain route, and the one that sort of may be more popular or easier to climb a certain mountain than another route. But the weather, changes so quickly. I mean, anything that might be a path or a way that you might have climbed the week before, it's away in 2 days, and it's something else. So you just have to find your own way up these mountains most of the time.
And in your walking, I take it, you didn't do any of the mountain climbing with the ropes and
sure.
that kind of thing.
Oh,
you did that
ropes.
part
Yes,
too?
You have to.
You
Like
have to.
on McKinley, the minute you leave base camp, you're roped because of all the
whole
crevasses
time.
and so forth, all the way, right from the base camp up to the top. And then, of course, on Everest, you're roped, and you're using crampons and ice axes. Usually on each expedition, they have a rock climber who goes on ahead and secures ropes, who is really a technical climber, because you can get into a situation where there's just like an ice wall. And unless somebody is ahead of you and can pull you up that thing, there's no way you're going to get up there. And so you're always sure that you have people like that on each expedition of that magnitude.
One of the most dangerous things are the crevasses that you don't even know that are there. And so that's why you're always roped.
Yeah.
And so that and your equipment, who supplies your equipment? Did
Well,
you supply it or do
this
those
is what
companies
I was
do
mentioning
it?
to Tony before. Janae Expeditions, the people that we climbed with, they supply the tents, the ice axe. The only thing personal that you have are your boots and your personal clothing that you wear.
Your
But the rest of
outfit,
those things
right.
are shipped on ahead of you, along with dried food and all these kinds of things. When we climbed Kilimanjaro, they sent all that stuff to Nairobi. Russia, it was Moscow. Argentina, it was Mendoza, wherever you're climbing. And then everybody meets there, you have all your equipment, all the things that you need, and you take off with the expedition and go up.
Now, did you study the mountains ahead of time? Did you study the mountains ahead of time? Did you read as much as you could read about the area and the mountain and all?
Yes.
Well, you know, there are so many different books out about mountain climbing, and also each mountain climber has a different account and a different story to tell. I mean, the weather might have been one way when somebody climbed Everest, and you know, you've read the story where these people got killed not too long ago. I mean, that was a tragic thing. I've read stories where people have gone up Everest, like the guy that we climbed McKinley with, without oxygen, and didn't have any problem whatsoever. So the only thing you can do is just get a general idea of what's going on, but you never really know what to expect on any of these mountains.
And then did you use oxygen at all in your trips?
We didn't have to.
No.
Usually you don't have to start using oxygen until you hit about 25,000 feet, and then a lot of people need it. But again, as I say, some famous mountaineers don't even use it, even at that height.
Some of the Sherpas on Everest have been to the summit 2 or 3 times, and you never hear about them, you know, and they go without.
Well, they're incredible climbers.
They're just incredible climbers, yes.
But you don't move very far and very fast, do you?
Oh, no. Everything's like slow
motion.
Anything over like 13,000, 14,000 feet, boy, you'd be amazed how things slow down. I mean, it's almost a crawl. As I say, it's just like being in slow motion. It's one step at a time, and that's it.
Not like walking in the park.
No. Or running a marathon, certainly not.
Well, even a marathon's not like walking in the park, I'm sure. I just have to ask this question, and I'm sure you've gotten it a number of times before. You live in a beautiful place in Idaho. You have a beautiful neighborhood you live in.
We do.
There's beautiful places to go on the ocean and to rest and relax, and you've earned so much because you've had such an exciting life. Why do you climb mountains, and why do you run 26 miles? With people like you that have done these remarkable things, I always ask that question, what motivates you to do it? I know your sickness and getting over that was part of it, but even if you had not gotten cancer, the kind of person you were, you might not have done all of this, but I suspect you would. You're both very creative people, but you really challenged life. It's almost like living on the edge. Well, it was living on the edge, climbing those mountains. What motivates you, I guess?
Well, the excitement, the challenge, setting goals for yourself, doing things that other people, dream about, but they never do. And then going on ahead and doing them. Also, just the excitement of travel. I mean, if you never climbed a mountain or never ran a marathon in any of these countries, just being in Russia, we were there when Gorbachev, the Soviet Union was still intact, China, Africa, India, these places it's such an education traveling all over the world like that. And the people that we met and have met during these times have been so exciting, and they're not exactly like your next door neighbor, you're not talking about cutting the lawn or pruning the roses. So
or where you had dinner last. Both of you are teachers. I'm going to get that on before and you taught for 40 years, I believe, Janice.
Yes, I did.
You taught for 20-some years, Dick. And you have a very good education, and you've done a lot about theory and ideas and all, but after doing your years of teaching and also doing this, I'll start with Janice. How has that changed your life? How are you different than you were before you did these things?
I feel very proud of myself that I was able to do this, and that we were able to do it together. And when you just asked Dick the question about, and I related it to little children, and I taught little children, like you'd say, can you run as far as the fence? And he'd say, I can run further, and each little child wants to do these things. And I just thought, well, we're just that way, only we're adults. Can we run a marathon? Sure, we can run a marathon. Can we climb this mountain? Well, let's try. And we're both very disciplined people, and so that's really some of the reasons why we did these things. Just like little children trying to run as far as the fence, we want to try to see how high we can go on a mountain. And and fortunately, together we have the same interests. Because it would be terrible. We'd never see each other.
That's for sure.
These past years being together, we would never have seen each other if we didn't train together and do these things. So,
Janelle Burke.
Well, that's very interesting, and I know you're going to be very inspirational to a lot of people who are watching, because you did these things in your 60s. Your mountain climbing interests were all in your 60s. So can you sort of share with people why you think it's important to keep active in those years and to incorporate that with both mind and physical activities that are broadening? Let's start with Dick.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I think it's so important for people. It's lifestyle, really. It's Lord knows we all have enough bad habits, and these are just good habits. I mean, exercising every day, watching what you're eating, it's not that difficult. And also, as you get older, it just makes your quality of life that much better. I mean, you can walk better, you can do more things, you can be active. If you're in a kitchen cooking something, you can reach up and grab a plate from a higher cabinet without having a backache. I mean, the gains and the benefits from these things are just, they're
Tremendous.
right there. Well, sure, exactly.
Setting a goal for yourself every day, taking a walk and getting out. And I read something the other day about old age, and I thought it was so apropos that it said the minute you find you can't do something, do it. And I thought, yes, of course,
And I have a second question, and this question is for Janice, and that is...
About 30
20
seconds.
Okay. The most interesting person you met along the way?
Oh my goodness.
Maybe one of the Sherpa?
I was going to just say that, yes.
Porpa.
Porpa is his name, and he was just the most wonderful little man. He was my size, and he was just the most delightful, wonderful man.
On that note, I have to bring the program conclusion. That's a very
Sure.
nice way to end
Yes.
this 2 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had as our guests last week and this week Dick and Janice Mullen talking about both mountain climbing and marathons, and they hold records as far as for their age, the people who've done certain marathons, or they have also done certain mountain climbing. You've been inspiring. As I said to our viewers, we have decided to use you to start our 30th year on the program, and it's been a delight. I know that Janelle joins me in saying congratulations to you, and thank you for taking this 2 weeks with us. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we have to bring the program to conclusion. Be with us again next week, and we'll interview yet another person on another subject. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running entirely college-produced program on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.